Welcome, you're at OTR, Over the Rainbow, Achieving Mental Health for Real. This show is about real people battling real mental issues, and experts with tips to help in the battle. If you want to know more, please check out my trailer. So, if you are serious about battling issues, stay tuned. Your host is Bob Adelman, and his notes about today's episode follows. Today's episode is a talk with Wayne Shipman as I speak to him about his journey to homelessness and his recovery, and how he finds peace with his new wife and new life. He suffers from bipolar and bipolar anger, which is similar to the anger that I express with my symptoms of anxiety-depression and ADHD, which I suffer from. We talked so long that I broke it up into 2 episodes, which premiere Season 7 of OTR, Achieving Mental Health for Real. Part 1 will premiere on Christmas Day, and then again on January 3rd, 2022 along with Part 2. So enjoy the interview.
Hello, Wayne. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bob. I'm really looking forward to having this talk with you.
Yeah. Could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm finding out the more I've learned about your story and kind of what you've experienced over the years with ADHD, how much we have in common. So I think a lot of things that I'm talking about with the bipolar issues and borderline disorders and different things I've experienced and suffered with over the years, there's so much similarity that I'm pretty excited about this conversation. I've looked forward to it for a while.
It does sound like you have quite a few issues going on. Currently, you're diagnosed as bipolar. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, bipolar depression was the original diagnosis, and I was going through some homelessness there for a while.
What kind of childhood did you have? Did it affect your adulthood?
Well, yeah, I mean, my childhood all the way through 18 years old when I left home set me up in such a bad way. When I got out here in the adult world, I literally was set up for failure by, a lot of the traditional teaching and things that I learned in my family with my mother, and especially my mother, because I experienced 5 marriages in the home growing up. And that was by the time I was 12 years old.
Wow.
By the time I was 12 years old, I had 4 stepfathers coming and going, and eventually it was 5 divorces,
When was the first one? How young were you? Because they say the younger you are, the more you're affected by it.
My biological father was only in my life for the first couple of years, and she moved on to a different husband. The trouble was for me as I got as a late teenager, 15, 16, 17 years old, I started realizing by interacting and associating with some of my friends at their homes, in their homes, seeing their parents, there was such a striking difference in how their parents had just normal interactions with their teenage sons and how they went about their daily business compared to the home I grew up in.
Would you say that your parents had mental illness that was undiagnosed?
Yeah, the more I've learned about the real scope of what mental illness is, definitely there was different issues going on, mostly with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm discovering is, to be honest with you, it wasn't really called mental illness back then, and especially it wasn't called mental illness kind of where I came from, my genetic heritage. I was born in Kentucky in the Deep South, and as a kid, we literally lived up on what we called in the holler. It was just a kind of a 2-room little house. It had electricity but no running water, and it had an outhouse out in the backyard, that sort of thing. My mother joined the military when I was a real little boy. She joined the Army, and that's what kind of took us away from the Kentucky, the mid-southern lifestyle, Appalachian Mountains, right there in Appalachia. And but most of my relatives at that time Bob, they spoke with such a hardcore Southern drawl,
Right.
and they used words and language that when I showed up in my elementary school, my teachers hardly even knew what I was talking about most of the time because I was using words they'd never heard of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so through the years, this stuff that I was experiencing, which was mostly severe social withdrawal
Mm-hmm.
from my friends, from school, from anyone that my parents would bring over for the weekend, or to, if they had a barbecue cookout or whatever, I was the kid trying to stay in the room with my door closed.
Would you say you had a lot of social anxiety, and that's what caused that?
Yeah, extreme. And
Yeah, I'm that way too.
yeah, I just didn't have social interacting skills, man.
Right.
What I learned later on was I had such a poor self-image of my own self.
Mm-hmm.
And, my earlier childhood, I don't want to beat it up too much because most of us have had, a pretty hard go at it in our childhood.
Some worse than others.
Yeah, and what you and I think we were talking about not long ago when we had the conversation, you and I were in tune with each other. Like, as soon as I would start talking about something, you was just like,
Yep.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think what we were agreeing on was, yeah, we had some hard things happen in our childhood. And as we got into the early adult stages where I wasn't just dating girls anymore, I was actually, I was on the hunt for stability. I wanted to settle down. I wanted somebody to call my wife. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to start a family. I didn't know how to go about that. But as time went on, I realized that the things that came with me, not really from my childhood, but from my whole experience up to when I left as an adult, was such, it's so hard to put a name on it, Bob. It's there were so many superstitions that my mother in particular acted as if was real life, even further than if you walk under a ladder, you have bad luck. And if a black cat crosses your road, you got bad luck. It was worse than that.
It kind of sounds like OCD. She could have
Probably.
yeah.
She was super paranoid about like everything going on, and we were victims always in society. She was victimized by society. We were victims in society, and she had a really a very strong vendetta to prove that we are somehow equals in society.
Right. Yeah.
We came from Kentucky. We weren't educated much. She married somebody that didn't write. He couldn't write. He couldn't read and write English, and he jumped from job to job to job. That was my early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the most abusive, drinking, narcissistic, loud, cussing person I've ever known in my life.
This was your natural father?
No, it's one of my stepfathers.
One of the stepfathers.
But see, that came with me as one of my personality traits.
Of course.
The way that I would express myself was being mad, slamming doors, punching the walls, because I didn't have emotional language to explain my feelings. And so what I was doing was reacting what I grew up seeing in my house.
Mm-hmm. And that's always the case.
Yeah. And so what that caused for me was a lot of social kind of retaliation. I mean, a lot of, especially my early 20s, up until I was 25, 27 years old, people my age were just so offended by me. They were constantly like threatening to fight me and calling me out, want me to they were yelling out like, "Come on out here, Wayne, we're going to get it on." And it's like, what in the world did I do? Why do you want to fight me? I didn't even realize I was offending people to that extent. I was just kind of expressing myself.
Do you think that you had, do you think that you might have had some ADHD as well?
Man, probably. But, the things that happened to me that were discovered by psychiatric evaluations were layered. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just one thing. Yeah. And so part of what I try to promote by having these conversations is usually we go into a situation where we're trusting the advice of the doctors, the psychologists, the counselors. We're trusting them because we don't know what to do with our feelings and we don't know what it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And when they talk to us, it makes sense. But the problem is they come to a conclusion sometimes really quick, a little bit too premature, and then they stand by it. They just stick with it.
I know.
And so when they first diagnosed me in 2008, it was bipolar depression mixed with bipolar anger, which is a
Mm-hmm.
very complex problem. It's kind of like, it's not just that bipolar depression triggers my bipolar anger; they go together.
Right.
It's sort of this permanent. It's a permanent kind of mindset that my brain, my mind first operates from being offended, and I have to like figure out why I'm feeling so offended. Like just the impulsive trigger to be angry comes over me, and I start yelling out, punching things,
Right.
slamming doors. Not
Yeah.
anymore, but then back then I was, and people were so.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what alienated me from my children this last time. I blew up
Exactly. Yeah.
because you know why you blow up? Because your feelings are so hurt that it's like you can't stand it, and you just have to blow up. That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
My daughter and son did something that wasn't all that nice to me, and I told them, and I yelled at them, and I put it on a text message, which was a big mistake. To anybody out there
Yeah. Yeah.
arguing, never put your argument on a text message. And my daughter has practically disowned me now, similar to your situation that you'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but all of this led to you got married. What year was that? And that you got married?
1991. So I went in the United States Army in 1987, which was almost right out of high school. Went in the Army, and I thought I was just going to be a patriotic soldier. My mother was in the military, but I almost had no respect. I didn't really have a lot of respect for the persona that I always saw my mother representing as a soldier. And I mean, I'm trying to walk on this with eggshells, but the truth is this. My mother joined the military in the mid-70s, early 1970s. I don't know, 74, maybe 72. During that time, there was very few females in the military. And so when she came into the United States Army, she had a chip on her shoulder. She had something to prove about females being equal. And it was a pattern that I saw. It followed her until the day she retired. She retired, I think, in 1996 or 97, something like that. She retired after 20 years in the military. And it was hard for me, even now to this day. I'm 53 years old. And when I see her, when I think of her military career, she spent more time defending herself as a female in the Army, trying to prove that she was the equal to everyone else. She spent more time kind of threatening everyone in the chain of command with like sexual harassment accusations but the problem was a lot of times, Bob, they weren't actually doing anything like, belittling her as a female. They were just simply trying to communicate with her and tell her, like, look, you're just doing this wrong. And she would yell at them. She'd say, it's because I'm a female. It's because I'm a female. She had this complex. So somehow later in life, that kind of came with me, not as being a female, of course, but trying to be people's equal. And I had this extremely terrible negative self-image about myself. I had no example as fathers. I had 4 stepfathers as examples, and they all had extremely different personalities and things. And we moved around so much every 3 years or whatever. We moved around because we were in the military, so I never had stability. So coming in now, I got married in 1991, and this was a result of kind of an accidental pregnancy. And I just tried to step up and be the man. I tried to man up.
That doesn't work a lot of times.
Yep. Yep. I just stood up. To her parents and everybody. I just stood up with my hand over my heart, and I said, you know what? I'm going to take responsibility here. You know, Bob, we had no business in the world getting married. Neither one of us had relationship skills. She also had a terrible self-image about herself. She was just kind of fragile and easily offended emotionally, and so was I.
That's so familiar because I loathe myself because with ADHD, I was constantly making stupid mistakes and people would pick on me. They'd make me into a clown. And I had no self-esteem. And I met a girl and she had less self-esteem than I did. So she thought I was cool. We went out for a while and I'm telling you, I just latched onto her. It was like, okay, I got a girl. I'll never get another one. Let's get married. Yeah, I was like that. I said, how can I get a girl the way I am? And then I finally got one from a friend. We went on a blind date, and I said, hey, you like me? Okay, good. Let's go out. And I never let go. And, you know, of course, I should have let go. I was just thinking about this the other day. I should have let go within 3 months. I should have said, no, it's not working.
Yeah.
But I was terrified that I would never get another girl, and I'd be all by myself the rest of my life.
Well, yeah. I didn't realize at the time that early in my life, I was 20, probably 22. And at that time, being in the Army back then, 1987, 1988, 89, 1990, in the military where I was not like in a combat unit. We were in a combat ready unit, but I never actually had to see action. But the trouble for me was I was around real soldiering men who were self-confident, who were emotionally strong. They weren't, you know, the alpha male with a chip on their shoulder. They were just confident people in their skills. I was wearing a military uniform, but I was trying to I thought if I just played the part, I would look like a soldier, act like a soldier, be treated like a soldier, but people could see through my stuff and they knew something was wrong with Wayne. And so anytime anyone approached me, and this is kind of what I'm getting at, anytime someone approached me, pulled me aside, said, hey man, you know, I can see that there's something going on here. What's really going on with you? I would first react by getting offended.
Yes.
And that's how I saw my mother. I didn't know this at the time, but I was I didn't have skills of my own. I didn't have skills to negotiate someone confronting you saying, I'm looking you in the eyes and I'm telling you, I see something here. What's going on with you?
Yeah.
My defense, since I didn't have a language to explain my feelings and I didn't understand my feelings, was to act offended, act like I'm going to bring charges on you for accusing me of something. You know what I mean? And I went into my marriage with that.
Yeah.
It was worse than just having immature skills. This is real deal psychological problems called a disorder. Right. So we were talking the other day about the difference between, mental health turns into mental illness over time. And regardless of what our peers think about it, what our children think about it, what our wives think about it, it's something very real. But as men especially, and women have the same challenge. I'm not just, segregating men and women. We're told that we're not supposed to cry. We're not supposed to feel like that, quote unquote. And I had so many people come to me and say, man, you can't walk around here all tore up about what happened 2 weeks ago. That, you broke up with your girlfriend, so what? And it's like, you don't understand the story, And they didn't want to hear the story. They just wanted to see me act. They wanted to see me act as the alpha male with a military uniform, I didn't have that ability.
You have trouble letting go, and that's what I have. I can't let go to something. I mean, I was fired from a job 3 years ago, and I'm still mad about it.
Well, it rattles around in our mind, and
OCD.
It's not you doing it. Yeah, it's not you doing it. It's your mind doing it. It's the filter that we process things.
It's hard for us to, or at least for me, to forgive. I have a hard time in forgiving.
Yeah, and we were touching on that too. And it's like the forgiveness issue to an average person means I'm going to forgive what they did to me back there so that I can move on, so I can quit dwelling on it. But it doesn't mean now I'm going to call them on their birthday. Now I'm going to call them on their Mother's Day. Now I'm going to call them and tell jokes and be happily ever after. That's not what it means in my world. People that have, minor offenses, Bob, is easy to forgive. But somebody that actually complicated my life so much that I lost 3 decades of my life in confusion, lost relationships. I've got people that have sworn an oath they'll never talk to me again, and this is 10 years after that, and they're still not talking to me. And,
Right.
Even no matter how much I change, no matter how much they see on Facebook or they see me in other public areas where, like, I'm definitely grown beyond the man I was 10 years ago, but to them, the scars are deep.
Right. Yeah,
And
I
so it
understand.
seems like it's okay for them to hold an offense, but it's not okay for me.
Well, they do it in just the right way. Yeah, they have a way to do it.
I'm sorry, but it
Yeah,
bothers me.
I believe
Yeah.
you. And so what happened was, after your divorce, tell us what happened that led to your eventual homelessness.
Well, the marriage lasted like 8 years, and it was more like 8 years of every 6 months or every year or so we would try to split up, and then we'd get back together trying to do the right thing. We had 2 children together. I've got 3 children now by 2 different mothers, and these children are all like 30 years old ish, and each of them have 2 babies, or 2 grandchildren. We got 6 grandchildren. My family tree has grown, and over the years, I just focused entirely on trying to be the husband, the man, the provider, the partner that I was expected to be, and that society says that we must be. And I just didn't have the skills, and I couldn't figure that out, and that was my frustration. So by the time we separated in 1998, mind you, I was like 32 years old, 34. I was 34 years old, I think. And I just went on a freelance kind of getaway from society, travel trip across America. Honestly, I just like, you know what? I don't have anything holding me down anymore. I'm just going to go visit some lost relatives along the way. I'm going to go to Kentucky. I'm going to go to Indiana. I'm going to go to Portland. So I kind of bounced around with Greyhound buses, and the internet was not anything like it is today. But by the year 2000, I was able to pretty much get on the internet and do some basic searches. If I wanted to go to Indianapolis, Indiana, I could get on there and search up and just do, some basic searches and find homeless mission shelters. I could find soup kitchens. I could find labor-ready temp gig jobs that I could do. And I would just go there. Honestly, I didn't know that was homeless. I did that for like 2 years, though, and people was telling me, like, man, when are you going to settle down and be responsible? It's like, be responsible for what? Everything I try to do and try to work and, try to build up, the woman either leaves me or, something happens at work. I get fired, and it's just for nothing. I thought society was a kind of a facade, like it's kind of a fake reality that we just have to go every day, be there at 7:30, leave at 5:30, never talk back, never be in a bad mood, never have a bad day. Not possible.
Politically correct.
Not
Yeah.
Yes, be politically correct. Well, by the time I learned those skills, I was in my 40s. Not when I left home at 18 years old, for crying out loud. So the first, like I said, the first 20 years at least of my life I was a loose cannon. I had no skills. I had no awareness. A lot of the superstitions and things that my family kind of used to joke about kept me so confused about what is reality. They sang happy birthday to Jesus, but they also had Christmas, snowman, and Santa Claus in the same yard.
Yeah.
They got a
How does
cross,
that make
they got
sense?
a Santa Claus, they got the Easter bunny, they got Jesus on the cross, they got Sabbath, they got, every holiday of the year they were celebrating. So when it
And
came to religion and spirituality, I had no distinction to
no.
know not necessarily what's true or not, but how to actually achieve what we call emotional wellness, being centered from your own values, your own core values. None of that was taught to me. I had to learn it along the way. But I ended up homeless in Portland, Oregon, living out in the woods.
Now, did you go? Did you go on the street as a homeless person, or you were just in the woods?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were collecting money.
I got so fed up. Yeah, I got so fed up with I would get a job, lose a job, get a job, lose a job. I felt so victimized. I couldn't do anything right. Instead of everything I touched turned to gold, everything I touched was broken. So in Portland, the long story is, especially in the year 2002, 2003, and 4, there was like 6,000 homeless people in the metropolitan area. They were everywhere. Homeless culture was just normal there.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't really seen that at that scale. And so I was so fascinated with these homeless people because as society, you know, they're so mysterious, right? It's like, who is that guy? Why is he out there? What's he doing? Why don't he get a job? Same questions everybody has. I had the same questions. Well, I started actually hanging out with them on the weekends. I was working as a maintenance tech for apartments. And on the weekend, I would just go down there with a backpack on and just hang out. I would go to the missions. I didn't need to be there. I was just hanging out. I'd eat the food and I'd hang out with the homeless people. I was going camping with them on the weekends. You know, there were state parks everywhere in Portland around the city. Go hang out. And then on Monday, I would come back to work and not tell anybody like what I did for the weekend. You know, I was having fun. It was an adventure. So my job experience got so terrible. I found out about a fake adoption that happened to me. My mother actually convinced me to go through with an adoption, and she manipulated me and coerced me for about 4 or 5 years of my teenage years and literally tricked me into believing that my father was basically a sperm donor. Didn't care, didn't want to be a part of my life. But she was telling him, because she knew where he was, she was writing him letters. Your son doesn't want to be a part of your life. He really loves my husband, Larry, you know, which I didn't like Larry. He was a dork. I didn't like Larry at all, man.
Who likes Larry?
Well, he was the kind of person, it was hard to catch him telling the truth about things.
I've seen that.
He was such an obsessive, lying storyteller. I knew him for 16 years, and in 16 years' time, I finally pieced together some of the things that he used to tell me as a teenager and some of the things that he's told my friends and his friends. And it's like, Jesus, man, there was nothing this guy really, the stories he was telling me all through these years were just load of crap.
Yeah.
And so now I have this obsessive thing, like I hate liars. I don't like untruth.
I'm the same way.
I don't like half-truth. I don't like deception.
Well, you've been lied to.
I don't like being lied to.
Your entire life you're lied to.
Oh, my God, yeah.
I mean, first there's Santa Claus, and then there's Easter Bunny, and then there's God, which we have no proof. And so you were lied to, basically.
Yeah. And, well, when I found out about this adoption, it hit me like a brick in the face. My anger from my childhood, I used to blame it on that stepdad that used to whip me a lot, punch doors and cuss out loud and couldn't read English. Neil, I used to blame him. And my mother just rode that pony out. She was like, yeah, he really abused us. Well, I confronted her one day and said, why did you marry him twice? You got away from him. I said, the reason I resent you now as a mother, you went back to him and remarried that same guy. And Bob, probably in 5 or 6 years with him, there was 6 or 8 times that she had me and my sister in the car ready to leave. We were leaving. She had suitcases. Yeah. We had food. We were going to her mother's house 200 miles away. She would either turn around and go back, or we would get to grandma's, and within a day or two, he would show up and we would go back. She had so many chances, and she would keep going back.
I was just going to mention, did you ever see a movie called Sling Blade, where the woman was codependent towards the guy? That sounds very familiar to what you're talking about. She was abused by this guy, but she couldn't leave. And that's the syndrome people go through. They get codependent on a person.
Yeah, it was similar to that, you
Yeah.
know. And so by the time I became an adult, my problem was I was so consumed with anger. Like a rage was in me. And
Mm.
this was the bipolar anger. And so when I was in Portland trying to keep jobs, it got to a point where I didn't just blow up on everybody. Somebody would come to me like at lunchtime and say, "Man, today you seem like you really got a chip on your shoulder." And I would just kind of look at them and say, "Okay, well, I know how to take care of it." And I would quietly leave. I would just like clock out and leave, not say anything and never go back, you know. And I just got to the point where I just couldn't talk to people because I just felt like they weren't hearing me.
Mm.
And when you were talking about like your family, you got 2 sons and a daughter.
Yeah. None of them really have a good relationship. My oldest one is a pastor for an evangelist church, and he's probably the best one because he calls me every week. "How you doing, Dad? I know you don't believe in what I
Yeah,
believe in, but I'm going to talk to you anyway." And then my middle son
yeah.
is a Republican Trumper, and we go back and forth, and it really gets too ugly. I don't do it anymore. And my daughter, we had some incidents, like I showed up late to her wedding because I was deathly sick. I came from the hospital and I traveled on Uber all the way down to the wedding. And she blamed me for that. And then there was a couple other incidents. And then that final incident where I yelled on a text message, and she hasn't talked to me in months. Yeah, it just destroyed our relationship.
Well, when you told your children over the years, you've been trying to communicate to them in particular that you know what your problem is.
And they don't
And
believe
you and
it.
I agree. That doesn't mean it excuses our behavior.
They don't believe it, and it's not uncommon. I talk to so many ADHD people in a group, and every single one of them says the same thing. People don't believe it's real. They don't believe because
It's
they don't have it.
They believe it's an excuse. Well, you're just using that as an excuse. You got ADHD. Okay, whatever. So why are you so mean to me?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I get the same thing with this bipolar. It's a trigger. Bipolar is a trigger. And the more I've learned about it, it is so complex, just like your ADHD.
Hmm.
Even though we might take meds or whatever we do, it doesn't change how the brain functions. Mine is called a bipolar brain. It's not like Wayne has bipolar depression. No, Wayne has a bipolar brain.
Hmm.
So my brain functions from the bipolar wiring, and I'm the one inside of my body noticing my reactions, and I'm the one that has to take control of my own reactions, which is usually too late after I say things.
Right. You blurt things out. I do that all the time.
Didn't you say that one of your son told you, you said, "You know what, I have really serious ADHD," and he said, "Well, that's a convenient excuse for being such an asshole."
Exactly. And he said that I have narcissistic personality disorder. That's what he calls it.
Yeah,
And they are close,
yeah,
but there's a
yeah. They're
distinct
very,
difference.
very related.
They don't want to own it. They don't want to own it. They'd
Yeah,
rather ignore it. It doesn't exist. I'm going to ignore Dad because he drives me crazy. That's it. Let me live my little poly world, and that's it. I mean, they don't want me in their lives because I'm negative and I'm this and I blurt things out and I'm rude and I interrupt people. Everything is my fault because I have a different type of brain than they have. And this is
yeah,
we're an oppressed minority. That's what I call it. Because there are a lot of people out there in my audience that have ADHD. I've reached out a couple of times and said, "What are you guys suffering from?" Zero response. Because I believe that they just don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit it to the public, let's say. And I get no responses, but I know these people are watching and listening to the show. So it's a hard thing to admit that you have a problem, and that problem is causing relationship problems. And they say people with ADHD commit suicide more than most other groups, and their
yeah.
families. Their families commit suicide because they
Damn.
can't adapt. So It's a super big problem, and nobody's doing anything about it. I'm trying to, but you know, how much can I do with a podcast? Only so much.
Right. When I was just hanging around in Portland, hanging out with the homeless people, I was so attracted to them. Now, I'm not talking about the guy that's standing on the corner and he's wearing shredded clothes and he looks disgusting. I'm not talking about them guys. I'm talking about ordinary people that are experiencing homelessness. And a lot of times it is not just because they can't find a job. It's because they can't function with everyone else. Well, I've learned skills now, but back then I couldn't walk into a lunchroom at work with 15 or 20 other people and just sit down and have small talk conversations. Talk about fishing, talk about motorcycles, talk about horses, talk about birds. Yeah, because I didn't have anything really to talk about. I was so used to people pointing out my faults that I really didn't want to engage with people. Well, then that made them suspicious because I was the guy sitting in the corner by myself. And then they would come approach me later on and say, man, how come you just don't hang out with us? And it's like, because as soon as you get to know me, you're just going to start, badgering me and,
Yeah. And abusing you. Do you know how much abuse I took? At work, I had several jobs where they basically, like I went on vacation one time and they ransacked my whole office. They taped my phone to the thing and everything. And I went to my manager and said, they have to stop doing this. And they came to me after that and they were ready to kill me. They were ready to kill me, literally. So I couldn't take it anymore.
Unfortunately, one of the traits of bipolar, and I think it's one of the traits of ADHD as well, is when someone offends you deliberately. Like, we get offended easily, but it's usually people don't mean to offend us. They're just interacting. We take offense to it. But when someone deliberately offended me back then, I would go home and I would work on it and work on it. I perfected narcissism as a retaliation because of my emotional wounding. Like, if somebody deliberately hurt my feelings and walked away laughing about it, it hurt me so deeply that I would plan my move. And then the next time I saw them, I would have something so profound I would say to them. They kind of wouldn't realize how offending it was until they had time to think about it. Well, then they would be standing out in the parking lot like, come on over here, come over here, come over here. It's like, man, why do you want to fight? Like, you're the one that started it. You said something to me, But what I was getting at about the homeless, I'm sort of an advocate now. I'm trying to work on building a website and doing podcasting, but it's a very slow process. Bob, I've realized that a lot of homeless people, minus COVID, COVID is a different problem, but there's something like 250,000 nationwide, the population prior to COVID was 250,000 homeless people in America. And it's not just economic related. It's because as a society, we have sort of a template of how people should be. We have an expectation how people should be, quote unquote. And so then our children expect us to just kind of cater to their feelings.
Wear a suit, Dad. My daughter would be upset I wasn't wearing a suit. And, it's like, I didn't have to, so I didn't. But she wanted the Ward Cleaver father, I guess. And I didn't know what to tell her. I'm not Ward Cleaver. I'm a weird guy hangs out with weird people because the society doesn't accept us. ADHDers are not accepted. They won't even admit that it's a problem. And I bet you if you went and tested the homeless, 50% of them are ADHD or dyslexic.
More than likely. Yep. I would say it's a... Well, you and I were talking the other day, and I heard this keyword that kept coming up. We were on the phone for a good 40 minutes. You said the word anxiety probably 15 times, and it caught my attention and stood out. And I don't think people realize how real of a problem anxiety is by itself. If you isolate anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
turn it into a disorder and then complicate that with ADHD or bipolar, what you have is the anxiety interferes with the skills that we actually do
Mm-hmm.
have. Anxiety causes us to
Exactly right.
amplify our worry about how people are going to interpret or receive us. I'll give you an example. Like, holidays right now, it's Thanksgiving weekend almost. Christmas is
Oh,
coming.
great.
My anxiety gets so peaked up because I know,
I know.
that, like,
I can't make it through Christmas.
well, yeah, I mean, I'm supposed to interact with my children. I'm supposed to send cards. I'm supposed to get on the phone and talk to the grandchildren. And it's like, they don't really want me to. My kids that are adults, they don't want me to get on the phone and be a grandpa to their children. And that's fine. That's okay. But the problem is society makes us feel sort of self-condemned when we don't or when we cannot. And that's the
But Wayne,
anxiety.
it's not okay. I challenge that. It's not okay. They have to be able to go into the real world and realize that some people have problems. They don't mean to hurt your feelings. They don't mean to yell.
Right.
But they're your family.
Yeah.
Families have to stick together. I always wanted a perfect family, and my wife just took the rug and took it out under me and moved them down to Charleston. But I was born and raised in New Jersey, and it's very uncomfortable down here for me. I don't go to church. It's very hard for me to meet people. I mean, they're very nice down here, but it's really hard to get close to a Southerner. That's what I found. I'll probably cut that out, but I don't know what to do anymore. They don't want me here. So, you know what? I'm going back to Jersey.
Well, we're dealing with social stigmas. I guess it's called society stigmas. There's a stigma which most people in society don't realize they're doing it. They judge us, right? They judge us based on who they are. Like, most people in society think they know what normal is. So if you're not normal, or if you're not what they think is normal, you're the oddball. And if you're the oddball,
it's Facebook normal.
Yes, Facebook normal. So then they analyze you, trying to figure out like what your problem is. But then when you get to know them, they don't even realize how much anxiety and ADHD and bipolar and depression that they're dealing with, because they have the social persona that they don't have any problems. They don't have any disorders. They don't have a problem like dealing with their emotions, but most people do. I wanted to take your attention to one of your episodes. Really, really touched me deeply. It's called Don't Give Up.
Mm-hmm.
It was your episode, Don't Give Up. The lady's name was Amy. She couldn't afford to get help. She lived.
Amy's was
Is it?
that you don't cut too deep. If the cut's not too deep, what's the name of that?
Yes.
One? Yeah.
She lives in England, right? She couldn't afford to get help.
Right.
She couldn't afford to get help. And that's a part of the challenge for most of us. We don't, not only do we not know where to go, who to talk to get help, but we can't afford to just walk in and start getting help.
The government is supposed to help her, but they let her down. And
she started cutting herself.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, you particularly, you didn't judge her for that. You didn't find judgment for her like
everybody else did. I lost people on my Twitter because of that.
Yeah, well, you saw it as, like, you said it was an act of desperation. She was cutting herself as an act of desperation. And you saw right into that. You saw that. And most people can't see beyond their own interpretation. That's what I meant by social
I went from
stigmas.
Xanax to Xanax to get through it. And guess what? The alternative is what? Drink? Drug? I mean, cutting is bad, but it's not drinking and drugging. I mean,
I did pot for 30 years. 30 years
Well,
of my
now
life
it's
I
legal.
smoked pot almost on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I was smoking pot because I literally could not cope or function. I'll just put it like
I
this.
believe
I
it.
think you said what Xanax helps you to keep
From killing myself. When I had the attack, I took a Xanax every time I got a chance because I couldn't live. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And my wife was sitting there going, "Come on, snap out of it. You're okay. What's wrong with you? What's the matter?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
snap out of it. Man up. Well, that's kind of what pot did for me. Pot kept me from really exploring my feelings, and it had me to be honest with you, it helped me have an attitude that I just don't care what people
Well, that's
think.
good.
Lucky me, because I internalized things back then. I internalized things so deeply that a minor offense or even a minor joking, you know how some people
Yeah,
are just
yeah.
joking, like, man, you look like you got 2 left feet. I would dwell on that for 3 or 4 days and be like, why in the world did he say that? And pot helped me to just not care, and it helped me just block out things. But what I've realized later on was I actually wanted to I'll shift gears here. I got to a point when I was homeless in Portland, living in a tent out in the woods. I realized, okay, I've gone too far. I've gone too far with letting society have this effect on me. I've gone too far with letting society convince me how broken I am, how useless I am. I've gone too far with how my children have convinced me I'll never be their dad. I'll never be their children's
How
grandpa.
awful
And
is
it's
that, though?
fine to a
How
certain
awful
level,
is
but
that? It's awful. Of
personally it
course it
still
does.
hurts.
Would
You know?
hurt anyone.
Personally it still hurts.
I mean, it's not
And
fair.
so I got to the point where I literally had a rope. I had a rope up in a
Mm.
tree and I was going to do it. And I finally realized, this is what I realized. Society drove me to that
Mm-hmm.
edge because I couldn't cope with what society thought of me as a person.
Or what they wanted you to do.
I had to find self-worth for myself that had nothing to do with anyone accepting me.
Exactly.
And that was my turnaround.
And
Now that we say that all the time. There's 10,000 YouTube videos. How to be happy today. 6 steps to emotional well-being. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? There isn't 6 steps to
It's
it's
one
kind of
step.
like do these 6 things and you will be a millionaire, you know? Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can be a millionaire. Well, not everyone can achieve mental wellness and emotional wellness just by following someone's program.
Right.
That's what stranded me so bad. Everything I tried, Bob, didn't work because I was trying something that worked for them or something they thought should work for me. And since it didn't, I was broken, see? And so I got to the point where, regardless of my mental status, my emotional status, I realized I had to be able to accept what was happening to me as if it was real. Even though my children didn't want to hear it, nobody wanted to hear it. So I turned it around. I made up my mind. What I'm going to do is stop all contact with my children, with my mother. Because here's the thing, you probably would agree with this. I haven't heard you say it. The more that you try and get a response from them and they reject, the more you wound yourself.
Well, not only that, the more that they will reject you because you're hanging on to them. They don't want to be hung on to.
Yeah, you're so
Yes.
clingy. You're so clingy.
And
then the ghosting, like, man, the ghosting
I
hurts
got
worse
blocked.
than anything.
My kids one day just blocked me completely, and they said, "We're not going to unblock you." And I was like so taken back by that. Even today, I'm taken back by it. And that's when I changed. I said, "Oh shit, I'm going to lose my kids, and that's the way it is. Maybe they'll come back to me one day."
Yeah.
But it changed.
That's what I had to do because I realized that the core, I'm trying to figure out how to say this because we're running out of time.
Yeah, the core amount of people
It's called
in the world.
codependent.
Yeah.
Well, it's called codependent, but for me, being bipolar and having like 9 out of 10 in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, if you read about borderline personality disorder, it's a disorder. The core problem with someone that has these emotional problems is being codependent,
Yes.
but in an extreme way.
Yes.
It's not like I want them to respond to me, Christmas is coming, I want a Christmas card. No, it's kind of like you're suffocating me if I don't get one.
Exactly.
If I send a text message and a few hours go by, I would start obsessing about it. Like, oh my God, why aren't they calling me back? Well, maybe their phone is dead. I'll try Facebook. I'll try Twitter, So I would send like 5 messages with 5 different
and they
ways.
hated that.
Well, that's what caused them to block
Of
me.
course,
Yeah. They were like, you are so obsessive. And it's like, no, I'm just so determined to get a response from you. And it's.
But the more you did that, the further you're driving them away. I stopped contact with them, and I'm going to let them come back to me now. And I kind of made up with my son, but my daughter is out. She's a mile away, but 100,000 miles away. That's the way I look at it.
We could be in the same room, and there's like no body temperature between us. It's just cold.
Yeah, it's just terrible, and it shouldn't happen, but it does. And I think there's nothing you can do but go hang out with the people that accept you. Yes, hang out with the people that accept you. I think that's an important thing. You don't want to stay friends with people that make fun of you and are always putting you down, because that's no help. You try to find people that won't do that, and it would help you a lot, I think. Okay, that's the end of part 1. We have a part 2. We didn't mean to go over so long, but we did. And I think part 2 will be just as entertaining as part 1 was. All right, so I'll give you all my links in the description so I don't bore you with them. And so have a great holiday, and I'll see you next year.